So is the US dollar going to crash based on what's happened the last few weeks?
It's entirely possible.
Is that going to lead to a potential new world order, aka the Great Reset? And what does this mean for me and you, the hard-working Americans?
You're about to find out.
So if you guys haven't been following, recently there have been some developments related to our US dollar and our reserve currency status. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, the reserve currency means that the world holds their reserves in our currency. It's a very, very big deal. It's a prestigious honor that's bestowed upon the country, typically with the best economy, the most economical and sensible and sustainable currency, and also the best military, which, hey, God bless the USA, we have access to all three of those things. But recently what happened was President Xi Jinping, the leader of the CCP, the leader of the Chinese people, along with Vladimir Putin, the Russian meme lord himself, have met together and have signed an official agreement. Now the details of that agreement is unknown. We don't know what's in those agreements. We don't know what they are. However, all we know for now is that there's going to be increased economic activity between the Chinese and the Russians. Now, on top of that, both countries, China and Russia, are now pushing for BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, for them to create their own digital currency and be completely independent of the US dollar, along with other countries that are doing the same thing, right? So Brazil and Argentina are trying to create SUR, to be independent of the dollar as well. And not only that, but the Chinese have been putting a lot of pressure on the Middle East, especially the Saudis, to get rid of the petrodollar and replace it with something else instead, which OPEC has announced that they're going to reduce oil production by 1 million barrels per day while pushing the price of crude oil up 6% to an astounding $85. Not really that astounding, but if you take into account the fact that the US government and the Federal Reserve have been trying to decrease inflation for the last 2-3 years, this does not serve us well, folks. This is going to skyrocket gas prices for all of us over the next year or so, which, like, maybe that's a good thing, considering the next year is an election year and it might not look so great for Joe. Which, speaking of Joe, the question is, what has he been doing this entire time? In a time where our economy is extremely threatened, there's other countries who are making moves that are clearly damaging our economic stability and our economic prowess, and quite honestly, going behind our backs in full disrespect in doing so. What has he been doing? Well, he has assigned a day for transgender people. 3 days after, of course, the Nashville shooting, which, by the way, it was a Christian school. I love how they don't have any sympathy for the Christian school in Nashville in which 6 people have been shot and killed. And it's not the first time a Christian institution has been under attack, has been victimized in a school shooting. But of course, no sympathy for them. We have to give a day to the transgender. And I wish we all had days. At this point, I'm sure we're going to run out of days for Joe Biden to give. I wish they had a day for 5'9" Korean guys who have a YouTube channel who also invest in real estate. I would love to have that day. Why can't I be represented in that regard? Now, this is my opinion of what happened from a 30,000-foot view. If you were to ask me where this all started, it all started when we mishandled the Ukraine crisis. So when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 22nd of 2022, the US had a choice, and in my opinion, the Biden administration completely mishandled how it should have been done. Because what we started doing is we started putting sanctions on Russia. We started isolating their banking system. They had saved up an extreme amount of gold and it didn't mean anything. So they were sanctioned, it hurt them economically. And in my opinion, China saw that as an opportunity and took it and started making relations and economic ties with the country that they believe could help them overthrow us, the United States of America. And by the way, in that process, the renminbi became the most traded currency in the Russian economic system. And on top of that, they are now pushing for BRICS to create a digital currency that will ultimately and potentially lead to a centralized bank digital currency. Now, for those of you guys that may not know what centralized bank digital currency, CBDC, is, it is a digital currency. It's theoretically a one world global digital currency that's looking to be pushed out by the global elites. Now, you don't want a world with CBDC because that's a world where we, as not only just Americans, but just human beings that live on this earth, that live on this rock, rotating around a big fiery star, is we will have no financial freedoms. We will have no privacy when it comes to our financial transactions. And also a world where we may potentially be fiscally punished for not going along the lines of the narrative that these global elitists, I guess owners of the Matrix, as one man would say,
the Matrix is trying to control your mind,
are trying to push and get us to go along the lines of, which may be the Great Reset. Now, of course, How will chaos in the global currency market, how will the US dollar not being the reserve currency of the world lead to a great reset? Well, the great reset at the end of the day is a reset that will centralize all power, resources, and control at the very top, the global elitists, and take it away from us, the people. I don't know about you, but I have a really big problem with that, right? It's a world where, as they say, we will own nothing and we will be happy, which of course, that means that they will own all the material and they will own all the power and pretty much just allow us to be fiscal slaves, as you would call them.
Are we free or we ain't free?
Well, if there's anything that we learned, the elitists, especially men such as Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab, love chaos. They love the amount of chaos that the world has experienced in the last 2-3 years because it's made them so much money. And it could potentially happen again if there's mass chaos in the economical system. So here's what could potentially happen. Without the US dollar being the reserve currency of the world and with massive inflation, the whole world could experience a global economic collapse like we saw 15 years ago. And well, amongst that chaos, heroes may rise, or in this case, villains, and propose a one world digitalized, centralized bank digital currency. Just out of breath even saying all that together. But that's the potential scenario that could occur. In fact, there's an article that I'll leave in the description below, and this is what it reads. The transition to settlements in national currency is the first step. So AKA countries setting up their own currencies like they're doing now with the Chinese, the Russians, the Argentinians, the Brazilians, you name it. Right? The next step is to facilitate the circulation of a digital currency or any other fundamentally new form of currency in the near future. This is getting very end times for me, right? Like if you read the book of Revelations, for those of you guys that are believers and pay attention to what it says in scripture, it says that there will be one world government, there will be one leader, and there will be one currency, and we will all have to take a mark in order for us to be able to buy, sell, trade, and this could very much be what's next.
Well, it's been real, everybody.
Now, going back to the statement here, this is what I find really disturbing. Most will label BRICS as a thought up by a collection of countries attempting to start another currency that will rival the US dollar. This is what most people believe. But according to Brazil, on their actual government website, the idea of BRICS was formulated by chief economist at Goldman Sachs, Jim O'Neill, in a 2001 study entitled Building Better Global Economic BRICS. That sounds very familiar. Build Back Better, right? So who is this Jim O'Neill guy, supposedly the mastermind and the visionary behind BRICS? Well, Jim O'Neill is a contributor called Project Syndicate, whose main funders include support from the Open Society Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, the European Climate Foundation, the European Investment Bank, Google News Initiatives, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And if you actually do a little bit more digging, this is a man who actually was directly funded by Bill Gates and George Soros. In fact, the guy who envisioned BRICS, a new global order, as so to speak, is paid indirectly by Bill Gates and George Soros, and also heads up the Chatham House in the UK, which is a sister organization to the US's Council on Foreign Relations, which I encourage you guys to do your own research on the US Council of Foreign Relations and their information on BRICS and the currency as a whole. I find it a little strange and disturbing.
That's messed up, bro.
So ultimately, how does this affect me and you? Well, right now we enjoy the privilege, and I'll just say privilege as the right word, of having our currency, our country's currency, be the reserve currency of the world, because that helps us out in all exports and all imports. We're able to kind of have a little bit more of a leeway when it comes to economic trade, and we're able to kind of regulate and ensure that no one's doing anything stupid and going crazy in the global trade. And so when we lose that power, we'll expect a lot of things to go up, because how often and how many materials, shirts, books, cars, you name it, do we get from other countries? I'm willing to bet that the very device that you guys are using to watch this video was probably manufactured by some child in China, unfortunately.
That's a bummer.
So ultimately, how does this affect me and you? Well, it's going to affect everything. I mean, let's start with the reduction of 1 million barrels of oil not being produced every single day, and the oil that is being produced being risen by 6%. And think about all the expenses with gas. We have cars, we have airplanes, flights are gonna get much more expensive. Manufacturing is gonna get much more expensive because how reliant is our equipment on oil and gas there as well. So it's going to affect a lot of things, and our US dollar losing its reserve currency is going to allow all these exports and imports to be more expensive on our end. So it's literally going to change the price of every single thing that we consume as Americans every single day to live our lives, so to speak. So what is my prediction? Where is this going to go? Well, I predict that the World Economic Forum is going to aggressively and strategically support BRICS in enforcing a centralized bank digital currency, in enforcing a one world digital currency for all of us to abide by. And they're going to do it in the name of equality. They're going to do it in the name of inclusivity and financial equity and diversity and whatever fancy words that they want to use to try and persuade us to go along with their narrative.